Welcome to Success Story, the most useful podcast in the world. I'm your host, Scott D. Clary. The Success Story podcast is part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network, as well as the HubSpot Podcast Network. The HubSpot Podcast Network has other great podcasts like Marketing Made Simple, hosted by Dr. JJ Peterson. Now, Marketing Made Simple brings you practical tips to make your marketing easy and, more importantly, make it work. If you like any of these topics, you definitely want to go check out the show. How to write and deliver a captivating speech, how to market yourself into a new job, how design can help and also hurt your revenue, creating a social media ad strategy that actually works. If these topics resonate with you, go check out Marketing Made Simple wherever you get your podcasts. Today, my guest is Sophie Watts. Sophie is a global media executive with a focus on venture creation for A-list stars, including Mike Tyson's Legends Only League, the sports enterprise which in November of 2020 staged the Tyson-Jones fight, the 8th most profitable pay-per-view event of all time. Previously, Watts served as the president of STX Entertainment, playing an instrumental role in the company's formation and growth, including the establishment of the fully-fledged movie studio and both reality and scripted TV studios. During her tenure, STX grew from a startup to a multi-billion-dollar media company that included several studios and secured capital from investors, including private equity firms TPG and China-based Hony Capital, Tencent, the Chinese internet giant Liberty Global, the media conglomerate, and PCCW, the global telecommunications provider. Earlier in her career, she worked in music, film, videos, and programming in London. She moved to Los Angeles in 2007, where she was a producer and financier on film projects, including the award-winning documentary Bully and the NBC show State of Affairs. Watts has been named one of Hollywood's top deal makers by Variety, listed in Fortune magazine's 40 Under 40, and featured in Variety's Power of Women report, Hollywood Reporter's Women in Entertainment Power 100, and in Elle magazine's Power List. She is currently the co-founder and executive chairperson at Metacurio, a leading creative studio for Web3, built and deployed an NFT Web 3.0 strategy, creative and distribution services for A-list talent and corporate brands. Within a year of launch, she positioned Metacurio into a fully fledged studio, carrying world-class brands into the next generation of fandom, entertainment, and experiences. So we spoke about her come-up story. We spoke about how she grew STX Entertainment from a startup into a multi-billion-dollar media organization. We spoke about financing, investing. We spoke about why she is so keen on NFTs and why they're going to go mainstream, and how blockchain can realign how artists are protected and get paid. We spoke about fundraising in a variety of different markets for traditional media, for A-list talent, like she did with Legends Only League, and also for the NFT company Metacurio that she's built right now. We spoke about the actual Mike Tyson's Legends Only League, what she did to create fandom and community around somebody like Mike Tyson, building an ecosystem and ownership around the artist's voice. Basically, what she's done for Mike Tyson, what she's done for Dennis Rodman, what she's done to create this ecosystem and this fandom, she does it at an incredibly high level with A-list talent, but she's going to unpack the strategy that she uses to build these communities, to build these campaigns, and the marketing, the sales, and the approach that she uses to get people excited and fired up about what that artist is doing. And what I hope you can take away from this particular podcast is that if you are a content creator, you can look at the strategy she deployed for Mike Tyson, for example, and you will unpack the lessons that she's learned, the strategy that she deploys, and you can use it for building out your own community and your own fandom in a very niche or micro way, but still the levers that you pull and the steps that you take to create these communities are basically the same, whether or not you do it at a Mike Tyson level or you do it at a micro influencer, a micro content creator level. And I'm hoping that's what you get out of it. So let's jump right into it. This is Sophie Watts. She is the founder, CEO, and executive chairperson of Metacurio.
Probably the most defining moment of my career was back in London in the early 2000s. and I was working with Madonna live from Coco, which is a quite famed music venue in London. And we were filming Madonna live on stage. And at this point, Facebook had just emerged. I'd just got this Facebook account, and I typed into Facebook a post that said, "Oh, you know, we're filming Madonna live from Coco in London tonight." And the evening came around, and I got a call from a friend of mine in New York, and he said, I'm in Times Square, Sophie, and there are these big screens that are showing Madonna live from Coco, and I just read your social media, this Facebook of you, you're on this thing called Facebook, where you're talking about, is this you? I'm confused. And it was absolutely a moment for me as a producer and as an executive and as someone who had started as a runner in music film, a PA. It was that moment of streaming will change everything, social media will change everything, and star power, which in that instance for me was the power of Madonna to truly reach audiences globally, would change the landscape completely. And that is what really kicked off the next almost 20 years of my career, working with A-list talent and brands to protect those voices and find new systems to monetize them.
And help me understand. So STX, that was the company that you started, correct? Or you were an executive at STX, and you grew that over the course of the last 20 years to multi-billion dollars in revenue valuation, and that brand was focused on working with these A-lists, correct?
Yeah. So my half right, yes. STX is a.
I try and be half right at least.
No, I love it. It's better than a quarter right, which is usually me. STX is a movie and television studio that focuses on working with A-list stars to produce premium content around their voices. I was president of that company for nearly a decade, about 8 years, from inception of just 2 employees to what later became a company with a several billion-dollar valuation, with investors including TPG, Hony Capital in China, Liberty Global, PCCW. But prior to that company, that star-driven studio vehicle, I had worked in music film back in London. And these were the days when people bought DVDs in their local store, and you could buy Beyonce live at Wembley as a DVD in a store. And I did many hundreds of those live music film projects back in London, and started as I've mentioned, when Napster came along and iTunes came along. It was a true moment that you realized, oh, the DVD is dead. This is all about how the star connects with their audience. And the way audiences want to connect is in the most seamless way possible. And so I took all of those A-list musicians I'd been working with in London, Beyonce, Eminem, Madonna, Elton John, Mariah Carey, and started saying, if these A-list stars are being caught in a system where the record label at the time had not embraced streaming, what would it look like if you were to build a movie and a television studio that did embrace global relationships and did embrace streaming, and almost realigned the model so that you were building with and around that celebrity talent instead of building around the value of the brand of Disney or the brand of Paramount.
So this was
this was 2007. Packed a suitcase, moved to Los Angeles, knew no one here, and that started the next 15 or so years of my career, nearly a decade of that at STX. And that kind of led to my career now, which is very much about how do you embrace Web3, decentralized models, again, working with A-list stars or A-list brands to empower their voices. So
I love it. And like that thread that you discovered when you went on social and you saw that, and then your friend saw that billboard in Times Square and you're like, "Oh my God, social and streaming." That thread of creating venture and creating value and augmenting the talent's voice versus the brand's voice, that's something that you've doubled down on again and again and again, and that's what you're doing now.
that's right. And for me, it's a look, there is a reason if you're Jennifer Lopez that you're Jennifer Lopez. I don't believe on a core level that you've lucked into decades of global success. It comes from a true idiosyncratic voice in the marketplace, an understanding of your audience, obviously, gifts and talent that have very few matches in terms of what you're doing. But intriguingly, media systems aren't necessarily built to empower those star-driven voices. I look at that and say, why is a movie studio really not built around the voices of these talents that reach their audiences, that speak a certain voice that has no rival in the marketplace? Why would you try to build a company that has a brand that can rival that of an A-list celebrity? Why would you not simply back that piece of talent and protect those voices and build systems and infrastructure to empower and better monetize those voices? I grew up in a world in which, I was watching movies in the 90s. It was the era of Tom Cruise and Julia Roberts, true star-driven eras of movies. To me, all social media has done is heighten the power of those artists. But how do you financially align yourself to help support the artist in building that brand?
And as this has evolved, you see that artists now take more power over their own careers, and I guess they're less reliant on these third parties because you found ways to create value, and you probably better serve. And you can tell me this, but I feel that I know the answer. You better serve the fans because it's now you're creating things that the artist believes and backs and wants to create in the world, but also this is stuff that is hyper targeted for the fans. It's not from like a publicly traded entity that has to keep their investors and their shareholders happy, that you would have to, maybe it's conflicting goals if it's a studio or an agency versus the actual creator or the talent. But now the talent's creating things that their fans want directly. Is that more or less the benefit? And this is what you're enabling, right?
Yeah, it's exactly that. And it's you nailed the question perfectly, which is, as a fan myself, it doesn't really matter to me if I'm watching a concert live or if I'm seeing it streamed or if I can buy merchandise for it or if I can engage with that artist on Instagram. I'd like to see a music film. I'd like to see the documentary. I'd like to see the live action movie. For me, there's less of a distinction in between, is this a movie or is this a live show, than it is to say this is about fandom and culturally building systems around the voices of those artists. This is only possible because of the advent of technology. The fact that a Ronaldo can, excuse my slightly yappy dog,
No worries.
the fact that a Ronaldo has 400 million followers on Instagram and can directly communicate with 400 million fans, which, to contextualize, is more fans and more social media followers than any Premier League soccer team in Europe. In fact, more than any of the British soccer teams in the Premier League combined in
Same.
one individual is wild. So I look at that and say, is the value here the league or is the value here the player? And if it's the player, Why does the player not have their own premium content arm and merchandise arm and digital content arm and branding arm? Because that individual has stronger and more engaged fans than any large-scale entity in the world. For me, how do you support that?
And after STX, so you this is a focus of yours, and it's continued through your career. Now, after STX, were you working with people individually? Because I know that you also founded Metacurio, but I know that's probably later on in your career. So I want to understand, like when you worked with Mike Tyson, for example. I want to understand the play. So you work with a creator, and where do you take them? Give an example so people can sort of quantify it. You work with somebody and you create this and you create that, and do you find investors into that project? I want to understand the deal flow, because you can take somebody like Mike Tyson. That's the one name that is like a huge name that you've worked with on, I think, one of his in 2020, it was like one of the most profitable pay-per-view events of all time that you worked with him on. But when you take that, how do you decide where to take that, and how do you facilitate taking that person and creating this community and this content and all these projects around that person?
So I'm a big believer in taking the voice of an artist and not trying to reshape that voice and not trying to give notes on that voice, but taking the clear branded relationship of fandom and building a world around it. With Mike, I was introduced to him in early 2020. There were rumblings of COVID happening. I had just left STX. And as those rumblings of, what's happening in the world, I went on Mike's podcast purely because I thought, what a global brand, an icon in his own right. It's a kind of fun story to tell my family that I've been on a podcast as this woman from England. I'm on a podcast with Mike Tyson. This is a cool story. And I sat with him and realized very, very quickly that Mike is, or certainly was, in a quite unique situation in which, as a traditional movie or TV play, he's a boxer. So as someone who ran and built a movie and TV studio, how do you engage with someone like Mike? Because he's not an actor, he's not a producer. What do you do with him? And on the flip side, if you're on the sports side of the world, you look at Mike and go, well, he's one of the greats, if not the greatest boxer of all time, but I can't hire Mike as boxer because he's retired. What do I do with this? He doesn't fit into my model as a sports league or as an agency or as a promoter. And as I was talking to him on this podcast, it became very clear that he was a prime example of a global voice, a global brand who could be really effectively monetized and empowered if you built a system that was outside of these legacy traditional media plays. And for him, what that meant was, what if you're not sports and you're not entertainment, but you're sports entertainment? What would that look like? And we started having a discussion of, well, what if we started not a boxing league, not a media league, but what if we started a sports entertainment league with you, Mike, where it was about engaging as many fans as possible, reaching as many people as possible, making it fun and watchable and a family-oriented event, but sports is at the core of that. What would that look like? And it was kind of amazing for him to say, well, what you're really talking about is an exhibition fight, doesn't go on my record. I'd like to do that, but let's program as part of that live event. Let's program Jake Paul, because a much younger demographic's gonna love that. Let's program Jake Paul as a boxer. And let's program Snoop Dogg as a commentator because it's fun and it's entertaining and it'll make people laugh. And let's program Snoop to perform because you'll get that kind of 90s group of women, not a traditional boxing audience, showing up to relive and have fun listening to music and a live show of entertainment. So we programmed really a night that was filled with music, with sports, with exhibition fights in November. And that live event, which had no audience because COVID had kicked in at that point, no audience, live from what was then the Staples Center, now crypto.com, was a pay-per-view event that streamed globally, broke all records for an exhibition event, but it also reached younger demos, female demos, an older generation of boxing fanatics who were seeing this icon, Mike Tyson. But as part of that, we had a docu-series that talked about the live show. We had merchandise that built this sports league for him. And so what you end up with is not a one-off media play, but almost venture value of a sports entertainment league that is repeatable. I am a huge believer that stars should own equity, should have upside in their own voices and their own success. So whichever artist I'm working with, this is not about a one-off movie check or a one-off live event check. This is about owning half of the business that owns all of the IP associated with that brand. It would be like giving an actor true equity, true shares in Netflix. That becomes a game changer for you financially and puts you in control of your own fandom and your own relationships, as you should be when you're an icon of that stature.
I just want to take a second and thank the sponsor of today's episode, HubSpot. Now, baking a pie, taking candy from babies, both things that are theoretically easy, but anyone who's ever made a pie from scratch or attempted to pry a lollipop from a screaming toddler knows that these things are in fact very difficult. But you know what is easy? Integrating, automating, and scaling your business with HubSpot. The HubSpot CRM platform seamlessly transforms customer data into usable insights like what's the average time it takes us to respond to a customer service request and how can we get better at it. The HubSpot Service Hub brings all your data and support channels into one place so your team can spend less time hunting for information and more time delighting customers. Plus, seamless connectivity with marketing and sales hubs means every person on your team has a crystal clear picture of your customer. Easy as HubSpot. Learn how HubSpot can make it easier for your business to grow better at HubSpot.com. Incredible. Now that's quite a thing to orchestrate, and obviously that's going to be a ton of resources. And just thinking through it from a business perspective, I don't know this world, but it seems like what you're doing that has translated into the largest pay-per-view event of all time is not something that has been done many times before. The way that you think about creator owning equity in their own success, and then I can definitely see how this is going to dovetail into Web3. But when you create this, you're creating this and this concept and this model of fandom virtually from scratch. Like it's probably not something that is replicated many times over. So when you try and build this out, and I'm assuming you try and raise money for it, right? How does that process look? How do you quantify the ROI on investment into something like this?
It's a brilliant question. Look, each artist, whatever their venture may be, has a different business model. Clearly, the most efficient way to build a company is, and I'm always a builder of disruptive companies where, and I want to be clear here, on some hands, it's wildly innovative and forward-thinking to build a company around a piece of talent. On the flip side, this is what Disney does for any media property that they own. You would never make a Star Wars movie if you weren't also making a Star Wars theme park ride and Star Wars tours and toys and The Mandalorian as a TV show. There is a world, almost an atomic community, whether it's Pixar or it's Star Wars or it's Eternals or it's Marvel. Disney does this better than anyone else in the world under that Disney banner. So these micro ecosystems are not a new thought. It's that we're replacing the IP of Star Wars with a living, breathing, moving, idiosyncratic voice in a star, a Mike Tyson. And when it comes to building it from scratch, whilst you're building the company from nothing, you are leveraging, in Mike's instance, 18 million people on Instagram alone. You're leveraging a global fan base that has lived with this voice and this icon for decades. You're simply taking that voice and monetizing it more efficiently. So in that instance, would you fund the company, or would you be deeply conservative, as I always am with investors' money, and fund a live event and then have that event roll back as revenue into the company? Of course, because you're diluting yourself less, you're maximizing your reach, and you're putting yourself, much as you would if you were a startup with VC backing, you're putting yourself in a position where your ROI is pretty extraordinary for no risk. So that is how we traditionally build all of our joint ventures with talent. And certainly when it's come to Web3, the basic technology of decentralization automatically reframes how to reach and monetize those audiences, initially through NFTs, but in a way in which you can truly segment audiences and community and fuel that community consistently.
And so let's talk about because as you're building this out, so when you were building this out for Mike Tyson, you did not use NFTs. This was something that was probably evolving as you were building out this entire campaign for him. But now, I don't know where it stands now. I don't know if it's completed or if it's ongoing. But as you created Metacurio, this is going to facilitate exactly what you're doing for Mike, but probably at a much larger and more scalable model, right? Is that sort of the goal with this?
It's exactly right. Metacurio was designed, there's a really interesting black hole in Web3 right now where I will never pretend to be someone who understands the deep tech plays of blockchain or how protocol functions. I'm not a technologist in that sense. And on the flip side,
you don't want to be.
And on the flip side, I go, well, historically, I've taken traditional Hollywood models and inverted them so that they better protect and support the artist upon whose name you're really greenlighting a movie or building a company. So I started looking at Web3, and really it was a slew of phone calls that I started receiving from different pieces of celebrity talent, calling saying, Sophie, you've made us lots of money over the last 15, 20 years, but hold on, I'm reading the New York Times, and there's some guy called Beeple, is that what it is? But there's some $69 million transaction, and I really don't know what it is, Sophie, but why is someone making $69 million and I'm not? And that for me was a real wake-up call of, who can provide solutions for celebrities in this space? And as you look at appropriately at the Hollywood studios and the Hollywood talent agencies, who are traditionally a kind of gatekeeper for working with and engaging with that talent, those studios and agencies correctly are not built to understand Web3. They don't need to be built to understand it. They want to take the check from it. But you're a centralized business model. You're never going to live and breathe blockchain like a Web3 OpenSea or a Ripple or a Binance is going to do. On the flip side, these Web3 companies have never worked with a global multi-billion-dollar walking, talking brand. You don't understand necessarily creative or how to build marketing campaigns. You probably shouldn't have to. So the theory of Metacurio was, what if you built a platform agnostic, sits in between Hollywood and traditional decentralized marketplaces, and what if it was a Web3 studio that exclusively signed the biggest pieces of talent in the world and handled everything about pulling that talent from traditional Hollywood into a Web3 space? Bless you.
Oh, thank you.
That
I
is
got that.
yeah, you got it. That is translated about a year since inception. We have over 70 client relationships, including Mike Tyson. We've done 3 NFT drops with Tyson. And here's a perfect example of how, as a company, Metacurio educates artists in the space, but handles the creation, the production, the marketing, the community management, and ultimately brokers the distribution for NFTs and anything associated with Web3 for those clients. Mike
And
went from a,
go ahead,
sorry,
sorry.
go ahead. But look, Mike went from a fairly reasonable sized drop with Corey Van Loo, who's a prodigal digital artist in the space, to 6 months later, that sold out in a week. 6 months later, Mike sold his Binance group of NFTs about 2 weeks ago in early April. He had 24,000 people show up on Twitter Spaces within a minute. That NFT collection sold out within 84 seconds.
Jeez.
He truly has a community that for the first time ever, he can clearly segment and clearly reward his community, his fans, in a way that's appropriate. That's a big future for celebrities.
What do you think traditional institutions are going to do when they realize that the stars don't need them to make money anymore?
It's a really interesting question because, and I am asked this all the time, what happens to the agent? What happens to the manager? And I am a deep believer that an agent who has a world-class piece of talent is the best at anyone in the world at maximizing how much their client is going to make. And I'm a big believer that a big piece of talent has a manager to help shape decisions in their career. I don't think those teams of people around the talent are going anywhere. I think truly they're the best in the world at protecting their talent, and we want them to be there protecting talent. The shift will be less so with talent teams and talent partners than what we've seen in the broader media landscape, which is mass consolidation of media giants. We've seen Netflix's stock plummet given its numbers and its subscriber base dropping. We've seen Discovery in massive consolidation. We've seen a very small handful of streaming giants emerge as dominant players in the market. What that's left is the behemoths, and the behemoths are going nowhere. But the behemoths are not incentivized to drive technological change. You are rewarded by being bigger and spending more money and being a volume play that has no competition. And I'm excited that those buyers exist and dominate the landscape. But what it has meant is that there's an extraordinary space for forward-thinking disruptors to enter the space and build aggressively, because those independent players are disappearing on a daily basis. That is, and I'm an optimist, that is a real opportunity for new disruptive thinkers to step into the space and build aggressively with forward-thinking technologies like blockchain. I do not believe that will come from these monolithic giants.
It will not. And I think you actually touched on an interesting point. Even the behemoths who are doing well, you look at Netflix, that is a behemoth that did disrupt Blockbuster, and they hit a ceiling on their TAM. They hit a ceiling on their TAM. They didn't diversify their revenue streams. And regardless of whether or not you diversify the tech that you introduce into your organization or to your customers, or you diversify just your thoughts about marketing, sales, anything like that, Netflix went down 30 points and lost $200 million because they weren't forward thinking enough, even though they're considered a forward thinking company. So you have to move and iterate quickly. And even Metacurio, the version you have of it today, you have to be cognizant that I think it has to always evolve and take on new things and figure out how new technologies can serve existing communities. And I think that because you're doing it now, you just can't lose sight of that in 10 years, because then there'll be somebody else that will displace you. So it's, what you're saying is not wrong, but it's smart what you're doing now. It's just all I think that I think you can never let, it's like a startup thing. You can never let the drive and the ambition and the way that you look at the world and solve problems as a startup, you can never let that leave. You can never forget that and think like that. It's always, I can't remember who said this. It's like always think like it's, day 0 or day 1. I think it's probably Bezos actually who said that. Like you always have to think like that. You have to think like you are thinking day 1 even when it's day 5,000. But very
That's
interesting.
exactly right. You have to, certainly and I hear this all the time. NFTs are so far along, it's too evolved a space for me to understand. I can't stress enough, this is the beginning of Web3. And right now, it's almost designed for people, unless you live and breathe in this protocol space, it's so complicated to understand. I have to say, on the flip side, if I walked down the street outside my house and I asked any person, how does the internet work? I would highly doubt that they can answer that. I couldn't answer that. But they would understand how to use Google and how to type something in and to have something pop back at them. That will be the transition point for Web3 and for blockchain as a broader concept. Less so how the technology works, but how as a mass consumer can it work for me in a way that is palatable and not scary and digestible and is consumer friendly. We are not there yet. We are in the very, very early days of what this is, which is exciting, but as a result, you have to be ready to pivot on a daily basis to not only capture those opportunities, but to protect people in the space.
Do you find that, you mentioned a point before that, which I also thought was interesting, and you've been in the space for so long, so I thought it'd be notable to touch on. You mentioned agents always protect artists, and they're the best people to protect them, but do they really all the time? Do they really always have the best interest, or will a platform like yours actually create a safer space for some people that may not have the best people around them?
It's a brilliant debate. It depends how you define protecting the artist. Inherent in an agency model is that you're taking a percentage of what your client is earning. So if you define protecting talent as protecting the amount of money they make, of course an agency and an agent is going to do that better than anyone else, because your job and the way you earn money is to get the maximum amount of money for your client. Mm-hmm. Is maximum guarantees for your client always the best thing? Maybe, maybe not. I certainly know pieces of talent, big pieces of talent in the Web3 NFT space who have taken minimum guarantees for an NFT drop and have had no upside in the long-term value of that NFT. Is that a good thing for the talent? You've certainly made much less money than you would have if you'd backed the long tail of an NFT strategy, but your money's in your pocket. So Who's right? My answer is always, what does the celebrity, what does the piece of talent care about? What do they want? My job here is not to convince a piece of talent to go one way or another, because back to our earlier point, there's probably a reason you're a piece of talent of that stature and that caliber and that reach. You probably know your brand and your team better than anyone else. So let me empower that and protect that. And some of these pieces of talent no longer have talent agents. I would support that as well. It's whatever works for that piece of talent.
I just want to take a second to thank the sponsor of today's episode, swag.com. Now, if you've ever received a corporate gift or swag in the past, how many of those gifts did you actually keep? Probably not many, which is probably because the stuff that you got was not so great. I've gotten a lot of stuff from trade shows and from companies in the past that I've just thrown out the second I get it. So this is why you need to check out swag.com. I've been on the receiving end of getting garbage gifts. I've also worked in companies where I only had access to a really, really small inventory of stuff that I wanted to give my customers and my employees, and I knew that it wasn't going to resonate. I knew that it was going to suck. So what is swag.com? Well, it's like swag upgraded. It's the best place to buy custom gifts and swag that people will actually want to keep. So they sent me a box because obviously they're sponsoring the show and I wanted to see what it's all about. I've worked in businesses. I want to make sure that the quality of their stuff actually was up to my standards, because I can tell you right now that when I get garbage, it goes right into the trash. It really goes right into the trash the second I get back from the trade show or the conference or whatever. So I received one of the custom swag boxes from swag.com. I loved the unique packaging, so it was a beautiful unboxing experience. I love the actual products they sent me, and there's a whole bunch more that obviously they didn't send me, but the stuff that they did send was absolutely beautiful. It was very high quality, and I can only imagine that if I actually got this when I was working for companies, I probably would have actually used it. And to be honest, I'm going to start using them for people that work on my show and in my company as well, because I know that this isn't just a novelty gift that somebody's going to throw out. It's stuff that they can actually use. They have so many unique and customizable gifts that I've never seen anywhere else. They have custom yoga mats. They have custom Apple AirPods. They even have branded kayaks, which I did not know was a thing. So they carry all these premium brands like North Face, Yeti, Nike, and more. And it's all customizable with your company's logo or artwork. So you're even able to create custom swag boxes full of great branded items, and then you actually deliver them in a custom unique box. With swag.com, they take care of all of your swag at their warehouse and they ship it to individual addresses, or if you prefer, you can just send it to a bulk location in one single shipment. It's easy to manage from their online portal, which you obviously get access to. So if this is something that you think would benefit you, if you have clients or customers or a team and you want to go the extra mile and you actually want to give gifts that people appreciate, which is the whole point of giving these gifts in the first place, go to swag.com for the perfect swag and custom gifts. Right now, they're giving everybody who's a Success Story podcast listener a special offer. It's 10% off your entire order, but only when you go to swag.com/success and enter promo code success10. Remember, for 10% off, go to swag.com/success and use promo code success10. And when you launch one of these projects, I'm curious about the strategy that you use to market it and to gain attention. Obviously, you have the reach of the initial individual and the talent, but what are the strategies you deploy to make sure this is a winning campaign or a winning launch that may be different from any traditional campaigns that you would have run to promote a movie, for example? What avenues, what mediums that you have to sort of target and focus on?
That's kind of interesting, actually, because I've always marveled at how a traditional movie studio spends tens of millions of dollars annually, if not more, on a billboard on Sunset Boulevard above the Chateau Marmont. And I truly look at that and go, how could you spend $100,000 a week for a billboard that maybe 10 people see, maybe 10,000 people see, but you have no understanding of whether they see the movie, care about the movie, engage in the movie, in a landscape in which you can so hyper-target audiences? Traditional studios aren't built to do that, and traditional marketing campaigns aren't built to be efficient. You're rewarded and incentivized for doing things the same way. That's the great joy of this space. You take a Tyson or a Dennis Rodman. In our instance, we took Rodman, who's a client of ours, who again, this is not about my feeling of what audiences would connect with or what I feel would be good for him. We, on a very granular basis, say, what does his audience base, statistically, analytically, what do they care about? What comes back is, well, they really care about the Bulls, and they really care about his fashion, they really care about his hair, and they really care about his clothing. At which point you say, well, let's reverse engineer into that audience. What if we were to do an NFT collection that's about what he's wearing, what his hair looks like, how he's engaging as a fashion icon? Let's respect what his target audience cares about and deliver what they care about. So the creative is very much in respect of and deliberately targeted to to market to and engage with what his fans want and care about. So we're instantly entering the space with something creatively that won't disappoint his audience. And that's really important to us. We're not going off brand here. We're respecting and elongating the brand. And then true to this space, community arenas, whether it's Twitter Spaces or Discord, are enormous market movers for NFT buyers. We curate those communities. We have specialists come up to talk to those communities, and marketing is done as native social advertising, all organically. We don't pay for any advertising. So you're really honoring and respecting his inbuilt fan base, which is the entire purpose of what Web3 does, is building atomic networks that you can scale as a whole. That is radically different to, the $250 million of marketing spend that I've overseen at movie studios. It is almost the exact opposite.
But it's funny because it's actually what good marketing looks like. Even if we took the Web3 component out of it, the fact that you want to understand and to communicate with an audience in the way that is authentic and is exactly the way that they expect you to communicate with them, it's funny how that doesn't seem to, it's not common sense. That's the way everybody should market. Even if you had $250 million, that's the way you should still market.
It's exactly correct. But if you're a big executive at a studio, you want it to be your taste and your vision and your mind and your marketing, because that's how you justify your big outsized paycheck.
I just want to take a second and thank the sponsor of today's episode, Manscaped. Now, us men know that we need to trim, we need to manscape so we don't have an overgrown mess. But I doubt you're doing it properly if you haven't tried the best products from our sponsor today, Manscaped. Taking control of your grooming is incredibly important. These products are so good, it's going to do wonders for your health, your hygiene, and your confidence. Manscaped is dedicated to helping you level up your full body grooming game. The package I recommend is the Performance Package 4.0. Inside the package is the Lawnmower 4.0. This electric trimmer is a hair's worst nightmare. The trimmer is designed to reduce grooming accidents and shave hair on loose skin thanks to a ceramic blade and advanced skin-safe technology. In the Performance Package, you also have the second best tool, the Weed Whacker. This fine-tuned nose and ear hair trimmer will make sure that your nasty nose hairs are completely under control. Outside of those two tools, you also have the Crop Preserver, which is a deodorant, and the Crop Reviver, which is a spray-on toner. Remember, get 20% off and free shipping with the Success Story Podcast code, our code 20success at manscaped.com. Remember, that's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use our code 20success. It's time to level up your grooming game with the ultimate hair and grooming tools from Manscaped. Yeah. Listen, there's a lot of people that are going to be pissed off with what you're doing. In a very good way. I think you're using tech, but the way that you market, the way that you build this business and this business model and all the forward-thinking ideas that you incorporate, there's a lot of people that you could put out of work and out of business if you do this at scale. I guess that's the goal. That's always the goal.
Well, Scott, I will tell you, when I showed up in my mid-20s and said I'm going to build a movie studio in Hollywood, I cannot tell you the number of people who thought I was a complete lunatic.
Well, that's a good sign.
Historically, you have to respect existing legacy systems, but common sense is undervalued in this space, and I'm a big believer in common sense.
I love that. And give me some examples of the things that creators and talent can do when you think of a new campaign for them. What are the different things that you could do for somebody? Because I want to take the things that you're doing with talent, with A-list talent, and I want a smaller creator to also think through different ways that they can try different things with their community? Because of course, if obviously not at the same scale, but still there's different ways to replicate at a smaller level that I think you could leverage Web3 NFTs for, to give certain access, to get to do certain drops of certain things. So what are all the scope of things that you've tried to do or that you think you would ever want to do with an A-list talent in Web3?
So, look, right now, we're certainly feeling the transition from static NFTs, even with iconic photographers. There's the great debate of, if there's no utility built into this NFT, why am I buying it? Mm-hmm. And I inherently believe that to be true. When you're, as an emerging creator, as a creator who's understanding the space, as a big celebrity in the space, it's always to me about authenticity of your voice and brand and respecting that authenticity. And I do believe that's undervalued as a whole. We're in a landscape in which, certainly with decentralization, truth and honesty is critical to what you're doing. And that is sustainable and self-syndicating as a brand, because people know what they're showing up for if it's authentic. At Metacurio, when you're buying an NFT, you should be unlocking, and certainly are, even in the Tyson or Rodman instances, you're unlocking physical utility. So we sold a 1 of 1 where you can go and spar with Mike Tyson. That sold for about 400 grand. We have a partnership with a company called Render, which is a physical object that is basically a printout of your NFT. So you have physical merchandise. That could be a physical key to unlock a physical space that you can visit, whether it's an artist's studio or it's their creative workspace. You're then interacting with that star. Maybe you can use that physical key, which is also a digital asset, to attend a concert. Maybe that live concert is an excuse to get a free hot dog from the venue. Maybe that free hot dog also unlocks a VIP experience. To me, building utility on top of NFTs to build true fandom is the ultimate win in this space. Whether you're a multi-billion dollar walking brand or you're an emerging creator, that ability to truly understand and build fandom and reward your loyal fans with experience and engagement, that is just a game changer on almost every level. And it's exciting for everyone. It's exciting for the fan, but it's certainly exciting for the creator as well.
I love that. And I guess last question before we do, I want to do a couple rapid fire to close this out. What impact do you see yourself having? What impact do you want to have? It could be at a micro level in your category and industry, or at a macro level. What's, at this point in your career, your vision and your passion?
I'm probably still too English to think that I could, it's that English humility where you're kind of embarrassed to talk about having any impact or meaning. I've spent my entire career wanting to and believing that art is one of the most powerful mediums in the world. I think that ability to shape the way people feel, the way people engage is critically important, certainly in a time right now that's a really complicated moment in history. Everything I do is designed to try and empower and build upon and respect that art, whether it's NFTs or it's movies, whether it's book publishing or it's live music film. My hope would be that any of my JVs, any of my companies, any of my talent relationships, Metacurio, are infrastructures that help artists speak to their audiences and engage with their worlds and make people feel good. Ultimately, if it can help people feel happy or excited or laugh or cry or build a sense of community, that's what I hope to do in my life and career.
Incredible. Okay, where should people reach out to you if they want to connect? Is socials, website, all of that?
They should ping us on Twitter at Metacurio NFT.
Okay, perfect. Do you have your own socials you want to send people to as well, or just is that the main one?
That's the main one because it's never about me. It's always about what
All
we're
right.
building.
I'm okay with that. That's no problem. Okay. Let's go through a couple rapid fire. You don't have to rapid fire through them, but
No,
the
I love
point
it.
is there's a few of them. Okay. What keeps you up at night now?
What keeps me up is the pace in which the world is moving. And there are such tremendous opportunities in front of us in media, in blockchain, and Web3. And I'm conscious that I've built a system that's designed to protect the artist. I want to ensure that we're moving fast enough that that art is always protected.
Good. Very good. Biggest challenge you've overcome in your personal life? What was it? How'd you overcome it? What'd you learn from it?
It's a macabre answer, actually, which is that I have put less focus on my family and relationships than I should have in a pursuit for work. And ultimately have learned that I've missed some great and critical moments in my life as a result of that.
That's tough. That's a tough thing to come to realize, but I think it's an important lesson because you're still very young in the grand scheme of things. You can definitely uh, fix things and do things differently, but it's a thing that's always I think that's the first victim of success in any field. It's friends, family, relationships, children, spouse. It's those are the things that you don't spend as much time on. So I think it's a good note for people that are trying to build something or to create something. You have to pay attention to that.
And I do ultimately think, it's Francis Ford Coppola's statement where he said, in loose terms, when I'm on my deathbed, I want to say that I said yes to loving everything and engaging with everything and feeling good about everything. And I'm not going to sit there thinking about how much money I made. I'm going to sit there thinking about my grandchildren and my family and my wife and my home and my
Yeah.
beautiful view and be grateful for it.
If you had to choose one person who's had a major impact in your life, who was that person? What did they teach you?
My mother was a deeply entrepreneurial record executive. She was the first employee at Virgin Records back in the day in London. She taught me to protect art. She taught me that it doesn't matter how successful you are, kindness is more important than anything. And she taught me to be good to people. And I will forever think of that.
If you had to pick one source, it could be a book, a podcast, it could be anything that's had an impact on your life that you'd recommend people go check out.
Look, I'm a music fanatic and a movie junkie. I consume almost any form of art on a really rabid basis. So it would be tough for me to pick one thing, but I will also say that I am a trained classical pianist, and you throw a piece of music at me, and I find it quite moving. So I would say the piano changed my life in lots of ways.
If you could tell your 20-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
Go for it. Stop worrying.
Good advice. Always good advice. Timeless. And if you could, last question, excuse me. And if you had to define success, what does success mean to you?
That's a big one because it has changed over the years, and at its root, I think success is happiness, and I think happiness is wanting what you have. And when you've found that, you should hold on to it.